Julian Wathen from ISS Facility Services, Performance Director of the Landscaping Division. There are two constituent parts that we really need to excite. One is the employer, which I represent, and the other is the young entrant coming into the industry. And we have touched on it, and Kirsty, you said it's some 600,000 in the next few years. It's such an important issue for us to excite these people, not at college stage, but at secondary school stage, I would argue. What more practical steps can we do as an industry to promote this industry in our schools and education so they actually have got the awareness of it and they're going to start approaching us and so on and so forth? Thank you.
Julian? Okay.
If I may?
Yes, sure.
Really good point. I'm chair of Enterprise Advisor Network in the East of England, which helps businesses go into schools and get that link. And I'm pushing obviously hard to get the land-based sector well represented in schools, and I think that's a key way. Employers and businesses spend a lot of time spending time with their suppliers, making sure their products that they get through, their suppliers they get through are to specification. But perhaps they don't spend enough time working on their people side of their supply chain, thinking about that as a supply chain. You've got to be working back with your providers, which is the schools and education, and therefore the only way to do that is to get more contact with schools and education. The only trouble is with small businesses that's really difficult to do, which is where working together comes in and actually sort of getting a structure and giving people resources to help them do that.
I mean, I absolutely agree. Until we actually get employers actually inside the schools talking about, all the opportunities, I don't think we will really do that deep level of inspiration and aspiration. I do think technology and digital resources can play a role in that, but nonetheless, having the employer absolutely involved is key. The issue, of course, is the time when the employer's doing their day job. I'm going to join up two pieces of recent policy or reform that's going through now. We've obviously talked today about apprenticeships. We haven't touched too much on T-levels, the T-level reform, which will really start to come in play from 2020 onwards. And in fact, the Institute for Apprenticeships, the IFA, will actually also cover the technical education landscape from next April as well. And that is all about connecting at even a school level, potentially. How do we start to connect job occupations? How do we connect routes from young people right through into apprenticeships and indeed beyond? And the government has just in Greening recently announced the work experience packages. I'm not going to comment on the doability of those at this moment in time, but the general trajectory of actually recognising how important work experience is for young people and a way to actually try and advocate exactly what you're saying, I think is a very important step forward. Let's remember we took work experience as a mandatory feature out of the school curriculum several years ago now, and I think we've probably had the damaging effects of that, and now it's time to try and put that right and put that back in. But it has to be done also with industry. It can't just be something done by a teacher who isn't actually connected to that particular industry. So getting that partnership right is going to be very important.
Okay.
Just very briefly, I mentioned a school we work with in Herefordshire, a primary school, with the most enlightened headmaster who loves his children to get out. We host a forest school for them, but he talks about the secondary school gap, the secondary education gap. You can infuse at forest school level, at primary school, children in the environment, and then it all disappears when they get to secondary school level because the curriculum just doesn't allow the time. And so I do think, we've thought about things like creating a register of industry champions to be able to go in, a register of industry sites that the school can go and visit. We've got lots of ideas working in Herefordshire in something called the Herefordshire Hub, but probably also a conversation for the Secretary of State to have with one of his colleagues in the Education Department as well about joining these things up.
Speaking as a former Education Secretary, I can see things from the point of view of schools, and one of the things always is, it's quite right to think of in supply chain terms, what's the future labour supply chain, but it's also important to think of schools as being in receipt of salesmanship. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're running a school, if you're a head teacher, you have, in the same way as if you put yourself into the shoes of any person running any enterprise, what's it like for them? And if you're a head teacher, you think, I've got to run a tight ship so that Ofsted give me a clean bill of health. I've got to focus on getting good exam results, so not just so that I do well in the tables, but so that the children for whom I'm responsible have choices in life. And I've also got to make sure that when people leave this school, they go on to be a credit to the community and to the institution of which they've been part. And I'm doing all this conscious that if I slip up in any way, if a safeguarding or health and safety rule is broken, then it's on my head because I have a duty of care towards the children. So therefore, I think, and this is something that we all need to do together, what we need to think about is, A, how can we ensure that the existing curriculum, an increasing emphasis on science, can be effectively delivered with the help of people in this room and beyond. So how can we help with not just chemistry and biology, but geography and other subjects as well? What is it that we can do to help deliver it so that out of classroom learning, which teachers enjoy, but sometimes are a little nervous about, can be more effectively integrated? And then the second thing, again related to that, is how can we, and there's a role for government and the DFE here, how can we dispel some of the myths and get rid of some of the concerns that people have about getting young people out and about into the countryside and onto working farms, some of the concerns that people sometimes have about health and safety and other issues, and making it clear that actually it's something which is a win-win for both sides. And then the final thing that I would say is there's a responsibility to challenge some stereotypes that exist about what happens in the countryside and how things operate there. One of the good things that happened when I was education secretary, and it was absolutely nothing to do with me, were the recommendations in the school food plan from Henry Dimbleby and John Vincent, which helped not just to ensure a higher quality of food being served, but also to develop a deeper understanding of how our food was produced and indeed what good cooking involved. And the more that people, particularly but not exclusively in urban areas, understand and appreciate where our food comes from and what's involved in its production, then the more compelling and interesting the work that you all do becomes.
Very sort of practical idea, really, but it's a good way of trying to help mobilise the industry to help itself and to help farm businesses and horticulture businesses of all shapes and sizes to take a bit more ownership of the skills issue and see skills and continuing professional development as part of an investment, not just a cost. So one of the ideas for me is that if we take the success, the phenomenal success of schemes like Open Farm Sunday, and how in recent years that has absolutely grown and really got into become a compelling story for British agriculture and horticulture in getting the British public excited and understanding better about what happens in the countryside and what happens in these farm businesses. To me, we could take that initiative and reinvent it for the careers and skills landscape. And by doing that, what you do is you motivate and mobilise the industry to take more ownership of these conversations about exciting careers, the kinds of skills that are required. So we see some really, really success here in horticulture. There's a lot of very good horticulture businesses that open their doors every year on a regular basis, whether it's for a week or for a few days or even a month, to graduates, to school leavers, showing them what working life is like, the kinds of jobs that are available. My view is it's a very simple thing, but there's a win for the new entrants coming in, really showcasing what the industry is all about, but also a real win in helping mobilise the industry to get much more behind this issue around the importance of skills.
Thank you very much. Two very quick messages, and the first really is the synergy that can occur through organisations that wish to promote careers in their particular sector or businesses, working with land-based colleges. We are in schools day in, day out throughout the whole year. We are talking about the full range of career opportunities that are there. We're giving out materials, we're giving talks. All of us offer taster days for 13 and 14-year-olds to think about what they'd like to come out of school, look at what gamekeeping involves, look at what arboriculture and forestry would involve. If we've got all that going on, then why not use the synergy that opportunity presents to coordinate rather than to duplicate the effort? And I think that would be appreciated also by school teachers, and it would just make sure that the whole effort worked better. And for the food and farming sector, can I advocate the Country Trust? A marvellous organisation whom I know a lot of businesses in my region work with in advocating estate days, visits to farms, coordinated by qualified teachers who are working for the Country Trust and organising it. I think that's a superb way of getting young people exposure to the food and farming sector specifically, but not necessarily others. Thank you.
There's time for one more question.